So we're really excited to have Logan Mohtashami here with us. He is the lead analyst for HousingWire. Welcome, Logan.
It is wonderful to be here. New Hampshire is beautiful. It is.
Yeah, I thank you for saying that. I want to hear your first impressions. You've been here about 10 minutes.
I thought I was in a movie. I was just like, okay, I'm from Orange County, Southern California. So I was like, wow, this is like a postcard. Like every 5 feet I walk, I look around and everything could be a postcard.
So just a little bit about yourself, Logan. Orange County guy, and now you are the lead analyst for HousingWire. I guess talk a little bit about that position, but also how you got here.
So this was all a tragic accident. I was going to be a high school basketball coach in the last century and teach history. And our family's been in banking since the late 1950s. And when I saw what I was going to get paid as a teacher living in Orange County, I said, whoa, that's not going to work. So got into the family business in mortgages, got into the stock market. So naturally, I was in the business area, and I'm a numbers guy, so I tracked numbers all the way. And then in 2010, a man named Jason Resnick, it was a financial website called Benzinga, said, "Hey, do you want to write for us?" And I was like, "Okay, I'll write about real estate because I think the real estate takes are a little bit off." And that's how it all started. There was no intention of me ever doing any of this. So I started writing about real estate. I had a very unique take about it because of our family's background in banking. The national media started to pick it up. And then I thought, you know what, there's so much bad information out there, that I thought I'm going to start doing this as a full-blown analyst on the economic side, incorporate charts and everything, and just to be a source of real-time information, not to generate clicks. And then in 2015, 16, my work became bigger and bigger. In 2019, Clayton from HousingWire asked if I wanted to write. And at first I was hesitant. I said, I don't know. I'm just kind of doing my thing. I just want to give the information out. But it's years 2020 to 2024. This is kind of the period I've been talking about for so long. I said, okay, I'll give it a shot. I'll just do maybe 1 or 2 articles. COVID happened. So I think a lot of people know me. April 7th, 2020, I wrote a COVID-19 recovery model. I had to go up to HousingWire and tell them, hey, listen, we're going to recover this year. I've got this economic model for recovery, and they're looking at me like, oh, you're crazy. And they were like thinking, we shouldn't publish this. You just started writing for us, and the work was really popular for. I said, no, this will work. It worked flawlessly. I retired the model on December 9th, and then the work just became bigger and bigger, started doing a lot of TV interviews. And I'm just like a data nerd that was just brought into this, kind of analytical world where we forecast and we do models. And then we have a top 10 business podcast. So none of this was part of the plan. It was just a tragic accident of some guy seeing me talk on Facebook in 2010 and said, hey, do you want to write? And I'm here now, and now I tour the country and talk about economics. So I am living the perfect dream life. If I died 10 seconds from now, it wasn't fair.
Yeah.
It is just like too much fun. I'm having way too much fun doing this. So.
Well, don't 10 seconds from now. But that accident is our gain because we now are, I'm now talking to the camera, as New Hampshire Realtor members, we are subscribers to HousingWire and HW Plus and all of Logan's insights, which was a big selling point when we made the switch to HousingWire as well. Your voice in this industry. So I appreciate the fact that accident happened. So let's move right to what we're here to talk about, and that's the housing market. Logan is in town to speak at the Education Symposium tomorrow, which is it's September 16th right now. September 17th is our symposium, and then this will be airing a little after that. But looking ahead to what you're going to be talking about, what's a general message you will have imparted to our members tomorrow?
I believe the housing market has to be explained in a way that people could understand, because everybody still has kind of 2008 syndrome into it, and part of being an economist is being a history teacher and explaining that what we have in the housing market in America is our homeowners are doing really good. Okay, so our credit systems are looking excellent. People's FICO scores are great. They have a lot of nested equity. Our only issue is affordability. Our demographics are much better now than they were in the previous decade. So when rates fall, demand should pick up. But the history of nominal home price declines going back to 1942, if I took 2007 and 2011 out of the equation, it was only 1 year. It's the early 1990s. We had 1 year was down 1%. So you're not going to get affordability better by home prices crashing, but you'll get affordability better as wages grow, households grow. Most sellers are buyers, right? And when they sell their house, they're much older than first-time home buyers, so their total incomes are better. So we're going to have 5 million near total home sales in America this year. We had near 5 million total home sales last year. This is with mortgage rates at 6 to 8%. So when rates fall, you can get demand picking up from all levels of buyers, first-time home buyer, move-up buyers, move-down buyers. It's just that we're at such historically low levels of sales versus our population and workforce that the bar is going to be very low, and we're at the next stage of the economic cycle to where rates have already fallen 2% from the highs. So we're going to have a better atmosphere going into 2025 for the housing market than we did the last 2 years because the Fed was overly aggressive in their stance, which disproportionately hit housing. But the demographics are good. The credit standards are good. We're in a much better spot now than, let's say, 2005, 6, 7, 8, when the markets were deteriorating on the credit side, and it created the biggest crash in home prices, but also the biggest credit hit to consumers in our recent history.
So you jumped right into interest rates and mortgage rates, and I do want to talk about that just in terms of housing fundamentals. So I've heard you say that forecasting is easy if you base it on the spread. So if you could talk a little bit about the spread, what it is, and where it is right now, and what that does mean for the housing market.
So this is a very unique topic. The spreads is the difference between the 10-year yield and 30-year mortgage rate. And historically, just to make it easy, it's usually between 1.6 to 1.8%, just to give everybody a rough number, going back to the early 1970s. And what happens is whenever there's a recession or there's stress or when mortgage rates rise up so much, the business of doing mortgages becomes riskier because a person's paying you up front. And if that loan refinances, they're going to lose money. So the spreads sometimes get really bad. The spreads have gotten awful for 2 years. Last year, it got over 3%. So we were not only have higher rates, the spreads were historically at high levels. So that's one of the reasons why we had 8% mortgage rates. In the early 1980s, we had 18% mortgage rates because the spreads were 6%, difference. So what happened this year is one of the calls is that the closer we get to the Fed rate cut, the spreads should improve. And the spreads have improved so much that if I took the worst levels of last year and incorporated them today, mortgage rates would be 75 basis points higher. So that's how much of a difference. And we are still far from normal. Right now, we're about 2.5% on the spread difference. So we still have 75 basis points to go just to get to normal. So imagine everyone right now, if mortgage rates were at 5.25%. Not near 6%. So not only can you get the benefit of better spreads going out in the future as the Fed starts cutting rates and the market believes the Fed's going to be lower for longer, if bond yields go down, we call this the double whammy effect. And that's what we've seen in 2024. We've had somewhat of the double whammy effect of better spreads and lower bond yields. Mortgage rates got as high as 8% in 2023. We're near 6%. All of this happened without any rate cuts because the bond market, mortgage rates get ahead of the Federal Reserve. They don't wait for the Fed rate cuts. And that's what we saw this year. As we were talking, it's going to be the Fed week. So they're going to do their first rate cut. But for everyone listening, mortgage rates already made kind of that big move, anticipation of the Fed changing their policy.
And I heard you say the other day, this is a bad take. Lower mortgage rates haven't helped. So just talk about that.
Yes. There's a lot of bad takes in real estate. There's a lot of bad takes in economics in general. But here we have something what we call as a tracker article. Every weekend we give everyone the latest and freshest housing inventory data, purchase application data, bond market, mortgage rates. And what I do is I calculate it for the year, and then give everyone an idea how does the data look when rates go up or down. Well, this year, mortgage rates, when they were higher, we had 14 negative purchase application week-to-week prints, and we only had 2 positive and only 2 flats. So it wasn't a very good year at all. However, starting in June, when mortgage rates started to go down, that completely changed. We have 9 positive prints, 5 negative. So we went from a very, very extreme negative data line to a almost 2-to-1 positive prints versus negative prints. That's a material change in the existing home sales market. The new home sales market has already had a huge beat in new home sales, and their forward-looking indicators got better. So I always say this is what we call as rookie ball. People who don't track data wouldn't know that lower mortgage rates. I think the media plays into this right now. I see a lot of even smart people say, "Oh, look at lower mortgage rates haven't done anything." I was like, "What data are you guys looking at?" And this is the difference between a narrative discussion and then a real economic discussion where you actually have data to show this. So our recent tracker article tried to show this explicitly. Like, okay, this is how that data look like when rising rates, and this is lower rates. And there is a noticeable difference here. So anybody who said that lower mortgage rates weren't helping, they never looked at the data, which tends to be the case all the time.
Okay, so I guess now that brings us to what are low mortgage rates. We talked earlier a little bit about this concept of the golden handcuffs in real estate. And I'm going to read now that as of the end of last year, and you can tell me if these numbers align with what you understand them to be as well, but 70% of all mortgages at or below 4%, 90% at or below 5%. That seems like a real serious formula for some stagnation. So where is it, in fact, and what has to happen to move the needle?
It's interesting. I don't believe in the mortgage rate lockdown for a different reason. For about 2 years, every single week, we've had people sell their low mortgage rates. We could see it in the coupon data and buy a house. Affordability after the 2010 qualified mortgage rule, people have to actually qualify to buy a home now. So the affordability issue is preventing people from listing their houses and selling them and buying another one. And that's prices and taxes and insurance and everything. So it's the whole enchilada in housing. So if we had an authentic golden handcuff, we'd probably be 2 million sales less today. But every single week, there are people, it seems crazy to people to like sell their 2 to 3 to 4% mortgage rates, but most sellers are buyers. People have to move. There's about 20 to 30% of sellers who sell their homes and don't buy another one, whether there was an investment or a death in the family or something to that nature. But when wages grow and mortgage rates go down, we could get more sellers that will be buyers because the affordability gets better. But home prices escalated out of control faster than during the housing bubble years. That's more of a total active listings got to record lows at the worst time ever, which has been a concern of mine for well over 10 years, that this period, years 2020 to 2024, is like the golden period of housing. Like ages 28 to 35 are the biggest in U.S. history. First-time home buyers, median age is like 33 to 35. So you're going to get a little bit kick of better demand. And those kids don't provide you a house. They're pesky little kids,
That's true.
So that's part of the problem. And we finally paid the price for not having enough product available, and home prices escalate out of control. So lower mortgage rates will bring the affordability better, and then that'll bring more sellers that are buyers. That'll bring more first-time home buyers. But we've had people sell their homes with low mortgage rates. If the golden handcuff were authentically true, or it'd be really bad. I mean, sales would even plummet even from these record low levels.
So you mentioned affordability, and I'm sure that every place tracks affordability a little bit differently. Here in New Hampshire, we have an affordability index, and basically it's at 58 right now. That number is at 58, and I'll explain how we measure that. And it's based on the median household income compared to what's necessary to qualify for the median price home. So 58 means that the median household income is only 58% of what's necessary to qualify for for the median price home under the prevailing interest rates. So I guess I just would ask you, I don't even know if there's a question in there other than to say, how does that number strike you? It's the lowest that we've seen since we've been tracking this for 20 years.
So there's one other time where affordability was worse. It was the early 1980s when we had double-digit mortgage rates. And a lot of people don't remember this, but in the early 1980s, even the run-up in the late 70s, home prices were booming in the 70s. And when home sales crashed in the early 1980s, we had worse affordability, we had a recession, we had more inventory, less workers. Home prices didn't even fall back then, but affordability was slightly worse. So that's the only period of time that I can refer on the data lines. But even then, when mortgage rates fell 2.5%, sales took off. And that's what we see in the data. There's going to be a nice chart in the presentation tomorrow that shows what exactly happened. There's a lot of similarities between the 1980s and currently right now with the baby boomers back then. They were playing the millennial role. Sales are at such low levels. But when we think about median incomes, you have to remember that the NAR uses this data line. They say an average household has to make $110,000 to buy a home in America. Well, what does America have that a lot of countries don't have? We have a lot of dual household incomes. So if somebody makes $90,000 and somebody makes $70,000, that's how you get 5 million total home sales. Like people ask me, they're well, who are buying these homes? Like our peak total home sales in the last decade was around 6 million. So now we're at 5 million with the biggest affordability hit. So home buyers in America, think about we are a country of 336 million, 162 million people working. A lot of dual household incomes can afford homes, and that's how you get that near 5 million. Rates going lower makes the pool bigger, and credit is available out there. We don't have a credit issue. That's how you grow sales, is by lower mortgage rates. Every economic cycle we've had since 1981 is at 2% plus lower mortgage rates. That's helped boost demand. And if we've had a higher end range of 6 to 8%, if we get a 4 to 6% rate range, we grow sales. How do I know this? Because the builders have been doing this for the last 2 years. They've been working in a sub 6% mortgage market, and their sales have grown since the lows of 2022. The existing home sales market has been disproportionately hit by Fed policy, so and that's kept sales at record low levels. But if mortgage rates fall, history tells us that'll grow sales, especially considering how low we are currently right now and how the size of our workforce and our demographics.
You are really nailing these segues. So the next question I wanted to ask you was about your expectation for the next year from the Fed.
Yes. So I've always had this policy with the Fed since 2022. I said the Fed is not going to pivot until the labor market breaks. They have this old school Fed model that told them that to really defeat inflation, you need to keep the policy as tight as possible until you actually see the labor market breaking. So it's been my thing for 2 years. And now, finally, the Fed is like, we're going to cut rates because now the labor market is getting soft enough that everybody gets to see it and they can't run away from it. So I call them cover cuts. So that's where I think the Federal Reserve is actually going to be a little bit more friendly to the housing market because we're going to get rate cuts. But for me, for my work, is that the labor data actually matters more. If the labor data gets softer over the next year, housing gets disproportionately hit in a good economy at times. Like we had a really good labor market in 2022-3. Millions of jobs are being created. Housing home sales crash. They're still record low levels. Housing gets disproportionately hit on the positive side when the economy gets weaker. And a way to think about this, a lot of people tell me, well, in 2008, rates went lower. Well, the credit markets were breaking. We had underwater homes. People couldn't sell their houses. That whole market is different. So housing is going to get disproportionately hit to the benefit side with a softer labor market and a more friendlier Fed, considering where sales are. And when people say, well, Logan, millions of people are going to lose their jobs and who is going to buy a house? I go, oh, that's cute. That's what all my economist friends told me during COVID. They said, Logan, who's going to buy homes? There's 20 to 30 million people unemployed. And I said, oh, don't forget the 5 million in forbearance. That's 35 million people off the grid. What they forgot is that we had 133 million people still working. That back then was 3% mortgage rates. So whenever the next recession comes, think of that in your mind. I always tell people, my army is bigger than yours. I got 162 million Americans working. You might lose 2 to 3 million people in your job loss recession. I got 159 ready. And they're not going to sit there and go, I'm not going to buy, oh my God, mortgage rates are sub 5%. Oh, I got to get in. That's how economic cycles work. And this is one of the reasons why nominal home prices don't usually fall since 1942, is that when rates go lower, that's one way to help the economy. Demand picks up in that regard. So we're at the stage to where we're going to be in a better spot with the Federal Reserve. But let's all keep in mind about the labor data, because if the labor data gets softer, the bond market and mortgage rates, they get ahead of the Fed. They don't. The Fed is old and slow by nature. They will always be old and slow. But the bond market won't be, thankfully, for everyone right now, right? We're at 6% mortgage rates because the Fed didn't cut rates, is that the market is anticipating softness in the data. And when the Fed starts changing their language, we're going to be in a much better spot with them next year than we have been in the last 2 years.
Great. Shifting a little bit now to New Hampshire specifically, and the New Hampshire housing market. What are some, if any, ways that make it unique?
Well, the inventory here is not growing as fast as the nation, especially in 2024. I would say New Hampshire's market is more stable than other places. You don't have the insurance and tax issues that Texas and Florida has, right? So I think that's a benefit. If I'm New Hampshire, I am marketing this state to people to come in and move, because you have a more stable market. You don't have a lot of inventory. Of course, the country doesn't have a lot of active inventory. But what I see about New Hampshire is different, is they're not getting the hits, the demand hits that places like Texas and Florida have, or New Orleans, right? You don't have the insurance issues. Everybody here can safely get insurance on their homes, and you don't have really big property tax hits like those states have. So more stable market than other places, but definitely you don't have the growth in inventory that some other places have. And our model is very simple: higher rates, weakness in demand, inventory can grow because it takes longer to sell a home. That's been in the data lines for 14 years. It's been a big part of my work. But more stability in the New Hampshire housing market than other states.
Okay, and you touched on inventory, another perfect segue. So one of the things that we struggle with sometimes at the State House is this idea that, hey, the interest rates are going to fall, the mortgage rates are going to fall, the market's going to take care of itself. Meanwhile, we're really pushing back on the inventory question. And the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority did a statewide needs assessment, I think a year ago or so. And what they determined was that New Hampshire needs nearly 24,000 additional housing units to stabilize the market. And by 2040, we'll need an additional 90,000. So what's the push and pull of the interest rates, mortgage rates, and inventory?
Okay, this has been a big part of my work for 14 years. Lower rates do not create more inventory, and I'm going to explain why. After 2010, we had a law called qualified mortgage come in. That means everybody has to basically be approved for a home purchase when they list their house and sell. So if 70 to 80% of sellers are buyers, that inventory is kind of a wash. You got 20 to 30% left. Again, what is one group of people that do not provide you a house? Millennials. Those pesky kids have been buying the homes with mortgages, and they started buying in 2013. So when you look at the inventory data, it's been slowly moving lower and lower and lower. And the only time inventory actually ever grows is with higher rates and weakness in demand, because it takes longer to sell. So you have to build. You have to build, baby, build, because the homeowner's vacancy rate is 0.9% nationally. Unless we have a swath of people just leaving Earth and leaving their homes behind, nothing's impacts inflation better than supply, right? More supply. When you build that house, it's there forever, or not forever, for a very long time. So we have to become a country that builds. And when rates go lower, what's going to happen is that seller sells their house, buys another one, that inventory is a wash, and then the first-time home buyers come in and they take what's left. And that's been the problem. Active inventory has been falling for kind of 14 years, and the only time we ever see inventory growth is with higher rates, not with lower rates. So it's a unique way to look at housing economics, but I believe it's the correct way. So if you want more housing, build, because that supply doesn't go away out there.
Great. That's exactly the message we're trying to convey to at the State House, because we have restrictive zoning policies in the state. Maybe it's everywhere, but certainly in the state. So we're trying to push back against that. So that's the perfect message for that.
Yeah, I tour the country and I tell people, if you think lower rates are, here's the chart, look at this. Oh, it's never worked for the last 14 years. So, the previous decade, we had the worst housing construction growth in history, and eventually caught up to us. We have millennials. They were here all the time. Avocado toast didn't break them, so they bought homes. They lived in them for a long time. And also, from 1985 to 2007, people lived in their homes 5 to 7 years. From 2008 to 2024, that's gone up to 11 to 13 years. Parts of the country, it's 15 to 18 years. I've lived in my home for 20 years. So we're just living in our homes longer and longer. And if you don't build something, the population is growing. It's not like we're not Japan, where 40% of our population will be dead by the end of the century. So we have a growing population still. We have a lot of people that are young households that need housing. And we just got caught in a very, very bad spot. And the best way to deal with inflation is supply, and you build it.
Great. I knew that I was going to feel smarter for you having come in, and I do. I appreciate it, Logan. Thank you very much for coming in.
My pleasure.
This is Logan.